Happy Friday, everyone. Happy March, and welcome to a very special edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. For those of you who are here for the first time, my show is all about celebrating life, celebrating art, celebrating music. And today, boy, are we going to be going back with Elliott Murphy. Hello, Elliott, and welcome to the show.
Hello, Richard.
And you're coming direct from Paris.
I am. I'm coming from the second arrondissement in Paris, France.
Not Paris, Illinois.
Our Texas.
Thank you. So first of all, how are things going? I know you've got a birthday coming up and you've got a big celebration planned in Paris. So tell us about that.
I do. Well, there's a club called the New Morning, and I've been playing at it for 35 years. And what it evolved into was a birthday show, always in March. I do 2 nights in March. The club holds around 500. It's kind of similar to what the Bottom Line used to be in New York, where I used to play all the time. And we usually sell out both nights, and it's a birthday celebration. And so this year we'll be celebrating my 75th birthday.
Wow, congratulations. And who's going to be playing with you that night?
Well, my longtime French guitarist, Olivier Duron, who's been playing with me for 27 years, I think. A great Australian violinist, Melissa Cox, lives here, and my son Gaspar Murphy, who also lives in Paris, went to school in America. He went to SUNY Purchase, but he's here now, along with my regular drummer Alan Fatras, Lucien Favreau on the keyboards, and Oriel and Barbalossi on the bass. So we'll be 7 people on that stage.
That's great. I always, I just did a show on my birthday here in New York, and to me, it's the best way to celebrate a birthday.
Well, for me, it is too. And the great thing about this club is it's literally 3 blocks from where I live. So,
That's great.
location, as us New Yorkers like to say.
Well, I'd like you to think of this show today a little bit as This Is Your Life, Elliott Murphy. So I want to go way back. You are from the States. You grew up here. Did you grow up in a musical household?
Well, I grew up in a show business family, and when you bring on my brother Matthew later on, he knows almost more stories about that than me. But my father had a show.
Let's bring him on.
There he is.
Hey,
there he is. And our father was Elliott Murphy Sr. I'm a junior, and he had a show in Flushing Meadows in the World Trade in the site of the 1939 World's Fair called the Aqua Show. He had that for about 10 years. And
and there it is, right there.
Wow.
There it is.
Amazing.
Yeah, my brother has the New York Times. Duke Ellington played there, Cap Calloway, Henny Youngman, and a very unknown composer at the time, Carmine Coppola, did the music for this show. He ended up, he's the son of you-know-who, and he did the music for The Godfather.
Yes, absolutely. That's good. That's great. So when you were, at what point did you realize that you also had the talent to pursue a career? To me, there's nothing sadder than the child of well-known parents or parents that are in the business who want to follow in their footsteps or create their own path, only to find out that same gene, that talent, doesn't necessarily pass over. But obviously, that's not the case with both of you. So at what point did you realize that you had the talent and that you wanted to pursue this as a career?
Well, I think, and I'm sure Matthew will attest to this, it was, I think when our father gave us anything, it was the tenacity to stay in there. He used to say no matter how good his show was, and it was an outdoor show, if it rained, nobody came.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's show business. My brother and we've been in it all our lives. Matthew played bass with me in the early days. Now he's a tour manager par excellence. Who are you working for now, Matt?
Well, now I was Steve Martin and Martin Short, so I've kind of gone from music to comedy.
But now they're just starting out in the business, so do you think
they're newcomers?
Matthew, looking at your calendar and who you've worked with, is there anyone in the business that you haven't worked with?
Well, I'm a survivor, as they say, and I've worked with a lot of fantastic, talented artists over the years, and just been really lucky with that. And I started with Elliott, and he taught me to play the bass back in the day. Then he was the one with the natural gift, and I was the younger brother trying to learn the bass behind
But
him. But
I think he's made a lot more money as a tour manager than he would have as my bass player. Of course, you can ask
Right.
my ex bass player Ernie Brooks that same question when he comes on.
Well,
Well,
Ernie,
Elliot,
I know that Ernie's waiting in the wings. If he turns his camera on, we'll bring him on.
Okay.
Since you bring his name up, his camera's off, so I want to wait until he actually is on camera. I know he can hear us. So you essentially, I mean, you're both in the music industry, but Matthew, you are a lot behind the scenes. Um,
right.
I just want to ask you, what makes a great tour manager? You obviously have worked with everybody, and everybody wants to work with you. So, what's the secret?
Well, you've got to take care of business, and you screw up. And just being reliable, I think, and being easy to be with, because when I'm with and working with an artist, I am with them all the time. I mean, like with Steve and Marty, I am next to Steve Martin constantly, so you have to be easy to be with
Hmm.
on that level, and take care of business, and be I guess competent and do the right thing, and
Well,
I,
this is a question for both of you. I know, from experience, it's not always easy being on the road. Do you both enjoy being on the road?
Wow, that's the tough question. I mean, when I'm on the road, I think I should be home with my family. And then when I'm home, I think I should be on the road making a living. But at this point in my career, Richard, I'm fortunate that I'm kind of a weekend warrior. I play mostly on the weekends. My audience, that's a good time for them, though now they're getting to be retired, my
Hmm.
audience, so they can go out anytime. But back to your question about Matthew, Matthew always had a good instinct for business. When we were looking for our first record deal and we had knocked on every door on Broadway, every record company, it was Matthew who said, well, we should try Polydor. And it was Polydor that was the label that signed us in the beginning.
But Elliot, do you forgive me for that, though? That's the real question.
Yeah, they were a terrible, terrible label.
Well, I want to ask you, I mean, what changed that they said yes when you were getting, this is a business of hard knocks. You knock on a lot of doors, and sometimes those doors don't open. What was the difference with Polydor where the doors open for you?
We looked good.
Yeah,
And
that's a big part of it, and it's
we dressed
really
well.
the story of Ellie and I going up to Polydor. Just randomly, we're in front of their office building. I said, well, let's go up and try Polydor. No meeting, no nothing. And we walked into the receptionist and we said, we've got a tape. We'd like to play it for somebody in A&R. And she said, well, let me get Shelley to come out and listen to the tape. And she came out, and I guess she liked the way we looked. She brought us into the back room and she played the tape, and she said, wow, this is pretty good. Let me go get Peter Siegel, the head of A&R. And Peter came in and said, wow, yeah, this is pretty good. Why don't, can you come to the studio tomorrow? We came in with the band to the studio and played some songs for him. And he brought us back to the office and he said, okay, let's make a deal. And it was really as quick and simple as that. I don't know if that would ever happen again.
It would
No, I mean,
certainly not happen today.
no, it is so difficult to get through those doors. But again, there's something, there must have been, do you think it was a shift in your mindset that opened those doors for you? Because obviously, you don't always get through the door.
Well, I'll tell you, if I can interject here, Matthew and I are both from Long Island, Garden City, Long Island, as Billy Joel is, as is Jerry Seinfeld, a lot of other very successful show business people. But at the time, there was kind of a prejudice against the bridge and tunnel crowd. They
Mm.
didn't take us so seriously. Manhattan was a different thing. But we had been to Europe. We had both been to Europe, been exposed to things there which just changed our life. We were in a Fellini movie, and we were hanging around a lot of cool people. Some ex-Warhol people have told us, you got to go back to New York and hang out at Max's Kansas City. So we were coming to Manhattan with this attitude of, hey, we knocked on Fellini's door and we got in the film. So what's going to keep us from knocking on any other door? So wouldn't you agree with that, Matthew?
Yeah, that had a lot of, just like you said, the chutzpah to do something like that. And also we had all those European clothes. So we dressed up, and at that time I had a full head of hair like Elliott, and we people just like, when we went in to go to the back rooms of Max's Kansas City, they just must have liked the way that we looked and let us in, and that was that,
But then
Go ahead.
The music, I think it was kind of unique for the day.
Mm-hmm.
The sound of that band and the sound that ended up being on Aqua Show, because there was a lot of glam rock going on. We weren't really in that camp. We weren't really in punk that came. It was
Aqua Show was the show that really turned everything around for you.
Aqua Show was a huge critical success.
Well, not to minimize, going on those things, but what it really was about was Elliott's songs were exceptionally great,
mm-hmm.
and the band sounded good, and we played well, and it was really, we looked, like Europeans, but it was really the music that got us there.
Well, Elliott, before Aqua Show, were you always playing music that you created yourself? Did you do covers? Was it a mix of everything? When did you find, or how did you find, your unique sound?
I think what happened, we lost our father at a very early age. I was 16, Matthew was 13. He died tragically at 48, and that just sent our world spinning off into space. And I think in a way it unleashed my creative juices. I had a lot of questions about life that I wanted to express and ask in my songs. And before we went to Europe, I was playing in a Long Island band called Bang Zoom, and I started to write songs
mm-hmm.
at that time. But then when I was in Europe and when we came back and got the band together, they took a different form. But I don't know. Jerry Seinfeld says so many creative people come out of Long Island because it's so boring to be there. Now you're going to bring on Kenny Margolis lately. Now Kenny saw us play in he was a student, I think, at college. There he is. He looked different back then in New Jersey. And I think he saw the original Aqua Show band play in New Jersey. Didn't you, Kenny?
Kenny?
I did.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. Yes.
Elliott,
I did. I don't see me up there, but
you don't see yourself? And we're losing him. Sorry. These things happen. We're live. So Elliott, how did you start putting your band together, your music, your musicians, your team? How did that all begin for you?
Well, I think I came back from Europe and I knew this was what I wanted to do. I knew that was the trajectory I was going to take in life. And I really needed a partner, and that was Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
And, I said to him, we can do this thing if we build a band. And I got the songs, and we got together a total local band. Everyone was from Garden City. It was from our hometown.
Mm-hmm.
And, my mother had moved into the city, but she had a house in Garden City, which she left us to rehearse in. So we would set up the basement rehearsal studio. We put mirrors there so we'd see what we would look like on stage. I think that was pretty unique. And then we started playing the clubs in New York. And, we're going to talk about that, I know, because the club scene in the early 70s was really vibrant. It was happening. There was Max's Kansas City. There was Kenny's Castaways,
Mercer Arts Center, of course,
where the New York Dolls were, and and Patti Smith. And you know, the biggest band that came out of that whole thing was Kiss. They came out of the Mercer Arts. And then Kenny, a little later, you know, CBGBs came later. Kenny played in Mink DeVille with Willie DeVille. But there was and it was easy. It was easy to get those gigs, you know. It was hard getting paid. But
that hasn't changed. But I want to go back because I arrived
nothing's changed.
In 1979. So, Matthew, were you always acting, you know, with the band in the capacity of getting those bookings, or how did the bookings begin to happen?
Well, you know, I did it with Elliott, but we knew Max's was a cool place to go, and we would go there, and then what was his name, Peter, who used to book Max's?
Peter Crowley,
and you know, I guess he liked us, and you know, we played him the tape, and he started to book us, and then kind of the same thing at the Mercer Arts Center, and we played there a few times, but I always liked that business aspect and setting things up and getting things done. That was something I always enjoyed, and to this day, that's what I do. You know, so it just was the matter of sticking at it, and those club dates were not easy to get.
And you got to remember, this was no email, no fax, no nothing.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just to get a phone number to call someone and to call them when they were in. I mean, and I think this is why I never played CBGBs much. I could never. What was his name?
Hilly.
Hilly, yeah.
Hilly Crystal.
Yeah.
We dressed a little too well for him, I think.
But you know, there was a real music scene happening in Manhattan in those years. I mean, you could feel the energy of it, the New York Dolls, and you know, it was really the center of that kind of musical scene and the emerging punk scene and everything. So it was very exciting place musically back then.
Well, when you were starting out, did you have a game plan in terms of where you wanted to go? Did you have certain Holy Grail venues that you wanted to play? Or were you just coasting along with whatever came your way? What kind of a game plan did you have just starting out?
Well, I think we got that deal. We recorded that album with Peter Siegel. It was very low priority for Polydor. But they put it out and they just got hit with a tsunami of good press, you know, Rolling Stone, front page review, everybody else. Christgau gave it an A. I mean, and then they had to play catch up. And so the big challenge then was to get a manager because nothing was going to happen without a manager. And we finally hooked up with a team called Lieber and Krebs, and they managed Aerosmith and a bunch of other acts. They were quite active, and they're the ones who then got us on tours with the Kinks and the Jefferson Starship and everybody. And then I would do my own shows in clubs in New York and the East Coast.
Well, how did that come about? How did the management team come to you? Did you approach them? Did they see you in action? How did that happen?
That was a very hard part to find a really good manager, because a manager and an artist is really about the chemistry and the understanding that the manager has with the artist, and that was very hard. I mean, Lieber Krebs, they were both agents, so and they were successful as managers. You know, they had the Aerosmith and the New York Dolls and everything. But
now, did they act? Excuse me for interrupting, but did they act both in the capacity of agent and manager?
No, they would get us with the agency. I think I was with who was I with?
ICM, yeah.
I still exist to this day. One of our most memorable experience finding a manager, we went to see Jerry Weintraub.
Wow.
He became a very famous and well-known producer in Hollywood. And he was managing John Denver, and he was promoting Elvis Presley. Who else, Matt?
Frank Sinatra.
Shows too.
So he took us to his closet in his office, and he took out a very sharkskin suit and says, "This is what I wear when I'm with Frank Sinatra." And then he took out this spangled Jackie says, "This is what I wear when I'm with Elvis Presley." And then he took out like a fringe country thing. "This is what I wear when I'm with John Denver."
Wow.
He was very doubtful. He was very nice with us, but he was going on to bigger things.
So do they give you a sense of, what you're going to wear? When you're opening for another act, that to me is the hardest thing in the world, because that audience not necessarily is there to see you. They're waiting for, the major act, but you started out opening for a lot of acts.
We did. It was, it all depends a lot on the opener, how affable they are with the opening acts. I mean, some like the Kinks, Jefferson Starship, it was no problem, One time we opened for Aerosmith and we were doing too well, and their roadies cut the cable in the middle of the show. But yeah, it was, and you usually have 30 minutes. You have 30 minutes. Sometimes you don't get all the sound or all the lights. We did a later tour where Matthew was tour manager. I opened for ELO, Electric Light Orchestra.
Wow.
And that was all in big 20,000 seat venues. And you'd get your 30 minutes and, half the audience would still be walking in when you're finishing. And so that was tough. But sometimes
very tough.
Very tough. But sometimes I opened a show for the Kinks at Hofstra, and a writer from Newsweek was there, Maureen Orth. And she came to the show and she wrote a big article about me and Billy Joel called The Suburban Blues. So we were both this new genre of music. So sometimes, you get lucky and something like that happens, even though I don't know how much of an audience you're actually gaining.
How many venues were there, when you were starting out in New York City, and when you got these bookings, were there any caveats in terms of when you could perform in the other venues? Was there a grace period? Obviously, you're trying to build an audience. What was that scene like early on in your career?
So much of that was dependent upon our management, I would say. Wouldn't you agree, Matthew? I mean, they were pretty classic. They were agents, so they thought the way you break is you open for big shows. And even if you only get 10% of that audience, but if it's 20,000 people, that's okay. If you get 2,000 people. And we did some good TV. We did the Midnight Special in LA. That was very important.
But back in the early days, like if you were playing at Max's, the guys at Mercer Arts Center, they liked that because they thought that you were, playing at the right places and would attract that crowd to their club.
And of course, that piggybacks onto other gigs.
Exactly. So it was, it was all part of being part of the scene, basically. So
that's very true. You want to hit as many hot spots as possible. Because as Matthew said, New York was just kind of exploding at that moment. The music business today has basically moved to LA, I would say. But back then, there was still a big scene happening in New York.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Ernie Brooks before. Here he is. So we got Hello, Ernie. Welcome to the show.
Finally, yes. I just want to say one thing about Matthew. It was an extraordinary talent he had as a road manager. Was when he didn't want the band to find him, he would disappear by moving hotel rooms. Sometimes as often as every
in the
half
same
hour.
hotel, or did he go to another hotel?
No, he just moved rooms, so we'd have to track him down when we wanted our per diems. We were hungry.
Well,
And he didn't want to empty the tour coffers too quickly. But I always thought that was an extraordinary talent, as well as being, all around the nicest guy. And Elliott is a nice guy too, but Matthew is the nicest.
Well,
but he has to be. That's the skill you develop when you're a tour manager.
Yeah, Richard, you asked before what was the key to. I think it is being unflappable in any situation, and that's really Matthew's. That is
and attitude, and how you adjust to these things. One of my favorite books is The Four Agreements, and one of the four agreements is it's not about you. And and that's gotten me through so many things in this business.
Yeah, totally.
And as we know, rock and rollers or other music are not the easiest people to deal with. Elliott can probably apply that to me, because sometimes we toured in Europe without a road manager. It would just be the two of us in a car trying desperately to get to an airport that's 600 kilometers away after staying up till 4 o'clock the night before playing the gig, because, you know, those tours were on pretty tight budgets. So we didn't want to pay for another night in a hotel. So
with no GPS.
And with no GPS.
No GPS in those days.
A rudimentary knowledge of local languages, but yeah.
Well, I remember when I was on RCA, RCA at that time, RCA owned Hertz Rent-A-Car. So we got a very good deal on a big Cadillac to tour on. But of course, and in the band was Ernie, along with Jerry Harrison, who went on to join the Talking Heads. Right. And Jerry and Ernie were both radical Harvard SDS people, and they did not like riding around in that bourgeoisie Cadillac.
Oh, it was so funny. We were in the back with Andy Paley, drummer and producer. He produced Brian Wilson's solo record. He's gone on. I talked to him a couple of days ago, and we fondly remembered the back seat of the big red Cadillac. and the funniest thing, we get somewhere, and Matthew loved exercising his control over the back seat. Notably of the windows, and we say, please, window control. He said, no, window control denied. Whatever infraction we incurred, I'm not sure. But
what happens in the back seat of the Cadillac stays in the
back seat of the Cadillac. Right. Yeah. So with these venues that you're working on in New York, did these club owners, these booking managers, did they have venues outside of New York as well? I mean, for a lot of people, New York is the goal, but you also want to be seen by as many people as possible, and you definitely want to be on the road. So going outside of New York, what was that process like for all of you?
Well, I think, every city had its scene going on. There'd be a club in Philadelphia you'd want to play. There'd be a club in Washington, the Cellar Door. There was a lot of places in Boston. Ernie was started out in the Modern Lovers in Boston. There were places in Boston and Cambridge.
Yep.
So every city had its scene, really, just about.
Well, also once we had the record out, we started playing with the major promoters in each city. Yeah. And back then there was a syndicate of major promoters in each city, which is now kind of morphed into Live Nation. But back then there were separate promoters everywhere, and your agent would book those gigs and work together with your the agency and the manager and the promoters. So then it wasn't up to us to book the clubs out of.
Well, I was going to ask you, how proactive were you in terms of trying to get these gigs, or did you relinquish control completely to your manager and your agents to get the gigs for you?
Well, the artist really at that level doesn't book the gigs. It's really the managers and the agencies act as their representatives. So,
and they all take a piece.
Of course, they all take a piece. But I'm talking about when you were first starting out, and when did the shift happen for you, where you didn't have to really concern yourselves with these gigs coming your way?
Well, Richard, you got to remember, we were so young. I mean, when Aqua Show came out, I was 22 or 23, I knew nothing about this. I always describe getting into the music business. It's like you're told, there's your Olympic swimming pool. You got to swim laps, and we're throwing a lot of sharks in the water at the same time. We knew nothing about the business. You'd get a lawyer, and you really didn't know anything. So you really were dependent upon these guys you'd work with, management agents, to tell you, well, this is the way to go. And then gradually through the years, you make those connections yourself. Mm-hmm. So I think by the end of the 80s, when I was more of an independent artist, beginning of the 80s, more of an independent artist, then I had enough connections myself.
Right.
And
too.
So I want to ask all of you, I mean, you're all still working. The business has changed a lot since you were in your 20s, which was just about 5-10 years ago. Thank you. So what are the biggest changes that you have experienced in the businesses that you like that have changed? And what are the things that were in place when you first started out that are no longer there that you really miss?
Well, so one thing I'll say is ironic is I always love vinyl. I love the big vinyl record format, and it
Oh yeah.
kind of went into hiding for a while, and now it's almost de rigueur. You have two things, of course. You have the advent of streaming and downloads, and now mostly streaming, which was, I guess, where most income comes from, which I still find it sort of hard to believe that that's actually true. But vinyl has come back. So now you make records and you go to shows and you lug records with you and then you sign them and stuff. So there's certain things that have changed and certain things that repeat themselves, as in what, fashion, that's kind of stuff gets recycled. But I guess, the big change is obviously towards so much of it being online. And so much of those little tiny revenue streams, which I'm sure all of you know. I mean, I got to say, I don't have as many probably as some of you. Certainly Elliott and Kenny may be here, but anyway, it becomes a concern and something you really have to follow up on and figure out.
But what we really miss are the young girls who used to come to our shows.
Oh, you're not going to talk about that on this show. This is a family show, right?
That. I want to hear about it.
When they come to my shows now, they inevitably say, "My father really liked your music." And a couple of months ago, I had one come and said, "My grandfather really liked your music."
Well, Elliott, in all honesty, there's something to be said about longevity.
Okay,
surviving.
But she didn't say, "This is your grandchild."
No.
Good. That didn't
Not happen.
That's what you don't want to happen.
That is not happening.
Kenny,
What I miss is the radio, because I remember when Aqua Show came out, and the first time I heard "Last of the Rock Stars," which was the single on WNEW FM, that moment made it all real. That was like, wow, this is the final. This makes the whole
take us there for a moment. I mean, what is that experience? I've had Melissa Manchester on the shows, become a good friend.
I opened for her many times.
Oh, well, I'm sure she's watching right now. She's on tour playing Fanny Bryce's mother in Funny Girl now. Wow. So she's still out there, and she has a new Midnight Blue. Everyone, just for a moment, you've got to hear it with her and Dolly Parton. It is incredible. It just hit. So Elliott, but she talks about that moment where she was in the car and she hears her, I think it was Midnight Blue, coming over the airwaves for the first time. And for you, it was Last of the Rock Stars. So what was that moment like for you?
I remembered I was in my apartment, and I didn't even, you don't know when they're going to play it. They didn't tell you, because that was my station. I basically listened to WNEW FM. There were so many great DJs on that station. There was Muni. What was his first name?
Yes, Scott Muni.
Was the main one. Fornatel, Vince Kelsa. Who, the Nightbird? What was her name?
Oh, Alison Steele.
Alison Steele.
She was when she passed.
Oh, I miss her. Oh my God, I loved her.
I loved her. So you didn't, and it was pretty much up to each DJ what they wanted to play. And I just heard that, and and I'll tell you, to this day, I heard one of my songs on the French radio just 2 days ago. And again, it was just a magic moment, Those are the two times I've been played on the radio. Back Last Rock Stars 2 days ago.
Out of the venues that you played, was there a favorite venue that everything about it? Was it the vibe, the people, everything that came together? And what made it so?
It was the Bottom Line. Kenny, you played the Bottom Line with me, didn't you?
Sure. Yeah.
I did too. And Ernie too.
Yeah. Bottom Line was
a great club.
Yeah.
That was really when that Bottom Line opened, and it was supposed to bring the level of professionalism. I mean, some of us, I'm telling you, CBGB's, is legendary and wonderful, but it was a dump. I mean, you would not go into the toilet there.
Had a good sound system, but you didn't want to stay away from the bathrooms.
And even the basement was worse with all of Hilly's dogs down there.
Oh yeah.
I won't go into it, but yeah, Bottom Line was one of my favorite venues. I think everyone here would agree with that.
Yeah.
Did you play that with Kenny with Willie DeVille as well?
Yes. Yeah. We played there a couple times.
Yeah.
And I actually played there with Cracker also, but mostly with Willie.
Yeah, that changed that raised the bar when that club opened.
Well, the sight lines were great. Everybody could see from anywhere in the place.
Yeah.
And the sound was great.
Yeah.
The food for the band wasn't too good, but the sound was really good, and the sight lines.
But you did have to pay for your food. I remember that.
Yeah.
Right. You had to pay for
no free
food.
lunch.
You know, I know we smuggled in food. You had to smuggle it in.
Now, are all of you going to be together and for Elliott's birthday? Is it the 16th, Elliott?
Well, Kenny and Ernie are in New York.
Yeah.
Ernie lived in Paris for a while, but he could not resist the beauty of Long Island City, so he had to move back.
Well,
Kenny's a New Yorker through and through. I don't know if ever leave, but they have both played with me at New Morning, I think, in the past.
I was going to say that's a pretty darn good club too.
That sure is. Yeah.
They have both participated in previous shows there. Matthew has seen some of the shows there, I think.
Yeah.
Actually, I've never been to the New Morning.
Wow.
Okay, well,
My wife has been there.
yes, your wife has been there, Pamela. Yeah,
That's funny.
that's right.
So, Elliott, when, where, and how did Paris happen for you? I mean, why did you make the decision to settle there?
Well, it was a combination of circumstances. 1977, I left Columbia Records, didn't want to leave, and my career was really in the dumps, and not sure. I didn't know what to do. And then my agent, I was still with this agent, ICM, and they got a call from a place in Paris called La Palace that wanted to book me there. And we went there. Ernie played with me.
Should show some film from that.
Great.
That's a great
Yeah.
show.
Oh,
Yeah,
I played in the Palace. And, Richard, I thought it was going to be a little venue, but it was a pretty good-sized theater. I was so thrilled. They knew all the songs. They knew the words to the songs. They treated us like royalty. Maria, what was her name from Last Tango? Maria Schneider.
wow. Yeah.
She came to the show, came backstage to say hello. That was thrilling.
Mhm.
And that gig just changed my life. It was like, wow, I might have this second act. Scott Fitzgerald said there are no second acts in American life, but that's why I had to move to Europe.
To get one.
In between 79 and 89, my career totally shifted to Europe, and I finally moved here for good in 89. And both Kenny and Ernie would tour with me at times in Europe. Kenny recorded with me quite a bit in Le Havre, as did Ernie. And so that's really, it was,
Well, that was Ron Zealand, the agent up at ICM, that really opened up that stuff for you.
He did, yeah.
Yeah.
Elliott, you said that your career, in your words, was in the dumps at that time. What happened? I mean, was it that music was changing, that the world was changing? What personally do you feel happened that things all of a sudden were not going the way that you had hoped?
Well, if you want to know the whole story, you got to read the current article in the Village Voice, or it's now out in the LA Weekly as well this week. And that kind of goes into depth. But, looking back, I think I was too impatient. I jumped labels. I was on Polydor, then I did 2 on RCA, then I did Columbia. I think I, in fact, was more successful than I thought I was. And I just got discouraged, We were on a tour. I stopped a tour in the middle of promoting Just a Story from America, that album. I think I just kind of ran out of steam there for a little while.
But you also have to say that Europe is often more supportive of good music from the United States. I mean, there's so
Yes.
many people who
Very true.
jazz, starting with the jazz
Oh,
musicians.
absolutely.
I mean, my neighbor here for a
Yeah.
long time was a guy named
Yeah.
Don Cherry, who was, a trumpet player who was pretty huge and not huge, but well known, and he could make a good living in Europe. When here, he'd play a couple of small jazz clubs downtown.
Yeah.
I think that's a history that they're appreciated. Philip
Yeah.
Glass was well
Yeah.
appreciated over there before people
Yeah.
knew much about him.
Hendrix was
I don't know.
playing small clubs in the Village when he was discovered by Chaz Chandler, brought him to England, and he just blew up,
Jimi Hendrix, yeah.
And all throughout history, besides the jazz and like rock, the Stray Cats were playing, little clubs, went to
Yep.
England, blew up.
And Willie DeVille, Kenny. I mean,
Willie
who
DeVille, yes.
for years,
Willie had a career in Europe for 30 years.
a major career.
I went to Europe with him for, many times. I had been to Paris maybe 30, 40 times with him, but I had never played Seattle. I'd never played Portland. He didn't go to those places. He played about 10 cities in the U.S., East Coast, West Coast, Chicago, St. Louis, and Kansas City. That was it for the Midwest.
Look, Europeans appreciate culture more than we do.
Yes. Yeah.
What would you say, Matthew? How would you describe what happened looking at it from the outsider? You got from the inside view.
Who's that to?
Matthew,
Wait,
About-
I'm sorry. What was the question again?
what do you think happened? Why did my career go the way it went?
Well, a big part of it was that management equation, that we never really connected with a great manager to guide you to develop your career and your art at that early stage of your career. And you were, you had all the seduction of the major labels and the press and everything, but it's really important for a new artist to stay close to their art and develop their talent like that, which you have done, and that's why you have lasted so long. But back in those early years, all the fame and everything was all very seductive.
It was.
Well, also there needs to be transparency, but the relationship between the artist and the management. And did you have a great symbiotic relationship with your manager, or was there a disconnect between the two?
I never, historically, you almost look at every legendary rock act. There's a manager. There's a legendary manager. There's Colonel Parker and Elvis.
Mhm.
There's Brian Epstein and the Beatles. There's John Landau and Bruce Springsteen. There was Bob Dylan's original manager. What was his name?
Albert Grossman.
Albert Grossman and Bob
Grossman,
Dylan. As Kenny just mentioned, there was Chaz Chandler and Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
I mean, and I never found that. I never just looked into
Willie
that.
never had that either. He never had good management.
No.
And he was lucky that the European agents loved him so much that they kept bringing him over because he had terrible management. It was awful.
Yeah, you could work in Europe. They would work directly with you.
Yeah.
It wasn't as
Yeah.
necessary to have a
Yeah.
And Willie, similar to me, we had bigger careers on the continent than in the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The UK was more like America, but the continent, things were just developing there in France and these countries, and you could make albums and license them.
Speaking of which, Elliott, how many albums do you currently have?
3,507, no, 40 something. I think it's 40 something albums, 45 albums. Yeah.
It's amazing. And Ernie brought up an issue earlier, and that's streaming. And that's changed the industry so much. Do you have someone who's on top of all of that for you? And how is that working out in terms of your career?
I do have someone who's on top of that, and you're looking at him right now. All the developments in the music business have actually served me very well, I must say. Streaming, my fans can find my music there as easy as they can find Michael Jackson's music. And if you have enough of a business head to take care of that stuff, and the whole internet, the way that has allowed me to interact with fans and with business, and it's really changed. But so everything that's happened, I've been through I started out, as Ernie was talking, with LPs. We just had vinyl.
Mhm.
Then we went to 8 tracks. Remember those?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Eight
yeah.
cassettes.
Cassettes.
Cassettes. What was next? Then I guess CDs.
CDs, yeah.
Yeah,
That was a huge revolution. And I remember when they came out, I thought I would never have a CD album.
I don't.
And then Polydor decided to release Aqua Show again on a CD. Matthew had to sign a contract because he was underage when he signed to Polydor. That's how young we were.
Yeah.
That's funny.
19.
But I have to say, another thing about formats is that I have a band that I'm presently playing with that I put together a while ago, and it's called Tape Hiss. That's because we all love that sound.
Oh, yeah.
When you put a cassette in a boombox and you hear that anticipatory sound, and then the music, and tapes really do sound good. A well-recorded cassette tape. So that's
Ernie,
another.
seen that famous picture of you and me and the guy John Paris? It was from Johnny Winter's band, and I'm carrying this big boombox, which I used to bring on tour with me.
Yeah, I remember that boombox.
Matthew, I want to ask you, because of the changes in social media and everything, with where we are now in the industry, what do you consider the blessings and the curses of social media?
Well, something that really changed in the music business, even before the real social media, was, back in the 70s, acts would develop locally and regionally and build regionally and locally before they would hit a national audience, And when MTV came out, that changed. Like, all of a sudden, you got your video on MTV and it was everywhere in the country, all at the same time, So that was really the first big change of that, from going from being able to develop locally to being nationally. But the music business has changed so much with social media, as opposed to the way that, when Elliott and I did it, playing in clubs and going around with our tape, that doesn't really exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And for a young artist, he's got to come up with his image and his persona and everything, and get that exposed onto social media. I mean, I don't know how they do it.
I remember.
Put it out there on
things, I'm
They
very
get
much
lots of
involved
hits.
in the New York City cabaret scene, and in the world of cabaret now, the artist is responsible for every aspect of getting themselves booked, getting their audience, getting their PR out, all of that. How did your audiences begin to find you?
A lot. Press was really important. Real press. You got a good article in the Village Voice. In my case, then I got a good article in the New Yorker. That really helped.
And people paid attention.
And people what?
Paid attention. They showed up.
People read. People actually read back then.
Mhm.
It was hard. You mentioned those cabarets, man. I remember when Bette Midler was exploding out of the Continental Baths.
Oh, yeah.
And we used to go to Reno Sweeney's too.
Yeah,
That
I
was
love
another
Reno Sweeney's.
great cabaret.
Right. And Trudy Heller. Yeah.
There was an uptown club we used to hang out called JP's, which was almost like a cabaret.
That's right. Yeah.
Does that world still exist, Richard?
JP's is not around anymore.
No, that's not.
But is there a scene
in New York?
Yeah.
Oh, there's very much a cabaret scene, but which is
good.
very eclectic, and it's it covers everything.
Yeah, and for music, a lot of the scene, you'd say more of the scene is probably in Williamsburg, Greenpoint, Bed-Stuy, parts of Brooklyn.
Little restaurants have nights where they have solo performers, small bands play, and it's all past the hat. There's no more guarantees for.
That's right.
That's
right. Working for a percentage of the door.
Yeah.
Before I started with Steve and Marty, I worked with this group Incubus, which are now a big band and everything. And they were starting in the 90s from Southern California. And they used to get in their van and drive themselves all over the country, playing in little clubs, staying at fans' houses.
Yep.
Really, and I think like that was the last time that kind of situation really existed with bands, developing their self like that.
Right.
Matthew, I think there's still young bands who do that.
There might be.
I hear about it.
That anymore,
And
so I don't know.
But they
Yeah.
probably make even less now.
Actually, it might be even a little easier now for young artists, young bands coming out, because they put something online on Bandcamp or SoundCloud, one of these, and you get a lot of hits, not hit singles, but computer internet hits. And sometimes they have thousands of hits, and then people start taking notice, and they have a following. I see like the Gramercy Theater has bands, and I see the Marquee. I've never heard of any big bands, and they're all sold out.
There's just too many bands.
Well, Kenny, you are so right, because Richard, I have a son, Gaspar, who's 32, and he's also in the music business. He recently took a trip to LA to explore opportunities, and he met with a bunch of producers. He's a producer, and he heard about a lot of bands that you've never heard of that are making a living making music, that are traveling around. They're just below the radar, And
a lot of stuff now apparently comes via TikTok, which I never listened to. But it's just so. I heard someone talking on NPR who was somebody in the business who sounded very authoritative, said like 80% of the young groups, that's where they put something on TikTok and it goes viral, and then the next step. I mean, people like Billie Eilish, they do albums in their bedrooms.
Right. Going to an audition in New York now, they'll ask you how many followers you have on your social media platforms. And sometimes they're casting not on talent, but on the number of followers that someone has.
Yeah.
Because those followers are going to sell tickets.
It's brutal.
Well, I have 4, and they're all right here in this room today.
That's really the capitalism sauvage.
Yes. Yeah.
It's the what?
Capitalism sauvage.
Okay.
So, savage capitalism, really. The idea, if you don't pre-sell something, you just can't do it on some level, on that level of getting started. Stuff.
Well, do you consider that something new, or do you feel that that's something that's always been part of the process?
I'd say the competition now is fiercer and fiercer because it's so easy. First of all, I mean, you buy the instrument, you have the instrument. Now you can get something, you have a phone, you can actually start off by recording it on your phone, and everybody has a phone. And actually the recording on the phone can be pretty good,
It's very easy to make music. Back when we started, getting into a recording studio was the only way to really make a professional music.
Right.
That was the big gatekeeper. It was expensive.
Yep.
Today, my son always tells me, making the music is the easiest part,
I remember going to a workshop at South by Southwest, and it was all these older producers, people sort of my age, and the workshop was why does so much of today's music sound like a word deleted, but
okay. We know what it is.
Yes, with S, and they were all talking about it. They all had millions of dollars worth of analog equipment, the right compressors and leveling amplifiers, and nobody cared because the kids walk around with their their earbuds and their cell phones, and they can't tell the difference between the stuff that they recorded and the stuff that gets recorded on at home on digital equipment, which I think we can probably tell, but most of the kids don't care.
Well, Ernie Gaspar would have a whole opposite point of view. He always said to me, "Oh, really? So what did your parents think of the Beatles? They thought it sounded like S."
That's true. That's exactly right.
Yeah. And he thinks there's a lot of great stuff now. And he's told, for him, Lana Del Rey is as great as Joe Baez.
That's right. Absolutely. They're just different. They're different. Matthew, when are you going to write your book?
We'll never get another job if we write your book.
I'll have to wait till I retire.
Yeah, I'm saying you got people
Well,
counting on you not writing the book, right?
I want to
Exactly.
thank all of you. This hour flew for me. I hope it was enjoyable for all of you. I want to thank everybody for being here. I'm going to give each of you a chance to have your final word today. It could be about anything that we spoke about that you want to build upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any final message you want to leave everyone with. When I finish, I'll turn it over to you, Ernie, and then
Okay.
Penny, Matthew, and then Elliott. You'll have the final word today. Uh, but first of all, everybody who tuned in, leave a comment on YouTube, share this, and if you're not a subscriber and you become a subscriber through this show, those three actions will elevate a level of where this video shows up. So thank you all for doing that. I end every show with the same message. And my message is to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. When today's show is over, pick up the phone, go to your Facebook friends list, and the seventh name that pops up, reach out with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private inbox message, a phone call. And let that person know the impact they've made on your life. And by doing so, you're going to make an impact on their life. I have a dear friend, Sean Moniger. He says we're all in the same storm, but we're in different sized boats. And I always say, I don't care what size boat you're on, as long as you have a skipper by your side. And with that, I'm going to leave the screen. And Ernie, it's all yours. Thank
All
you.
right. Well, I like that nautical image because I love to sail. I even have a friend who has a sailboat in Newtown Creek, which runs between Brooklyn and Queens, one of the most polluted bodies of water in the world. But you get out there on the East River, it's beautiful. So that's my release. And I got to say that other than that, things from where I sit in New York City don't look too good I'd say there's a storm clouds on the horizon. So my message is, God damn it, get out and vote. And youth, don't give me anything. College kids, don't talk to me about voting for Cornell West. No. Because if you do, it'll be the last time you ever get to vote in any kind of election in this country. And if I seem like I'm obsessed with politics, it's because I am. But politics and music do go together. As all good music has an element that is political. And I'll say it's been a pleasure to be here with three good friends. And this was a great podcast and happy to be on it. I got to jump off to get to a political rally. Okay. Matthew.
Well, I guess I first want to say thank you for having us on this, Richard. And it was, very interesting and fantastic. And, of course, echo everything that Ernie just said about getting out and voting and everything. But, for any young artists that might be watching or listening, just to follow your dreams, stay out there and have tenacity and don't give up. And entertainment on anything is, whether it's music or comedy or acting, is a fantastic career and way to spend your life if you can do it. Anyway, and that I'll sign off and thank you again and see you in the future.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted to say I have a unique history with Elliott, because I was a fan in like 72, 73 and didn't get to play with him until 99, I think it was.
Wow.
96? No, 96. 95?
Yeah.
96. Yeah, no, it was 95 or 96. So I had been a fan first, and then my dream came true, and I got to play with Elliott. and it was a great run, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime. I'm actually off to a sound check right now, but I agree with Ernie and Matthew. It's really important to get out there and vote, and because we really don't want a king in this country, and where we'll have no rights whatsoever. So with that, I thank you for including me in this. It was a great time, and this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
It's down to me. Well, first of all, Richard, thank you so much for hosting this podcast. You had three friends, and my brother and Ernie and Kenny, who were just all played integral parts in my career and in my life. Kenny has played on some of my most well-liked songs of kind of the second act of my career, recorded with me many times. Great Fine toured with me all over Spain. Ernie and I toured together all over Europe, and I've known Ernie since he was in the Modern Lovers way back when. And Matthew and I, the fact that we have both just stayed in show business in our own ways all these years, it really saved our lives. And just speaking for me personally, I'm just so grateful for everything that's happened to me. As my son, I was complaining to my son Gaspar the other day. I said, I'd never really had a big hit. And he said, Dad, a 50-year career is a big hit. And that makes it all seem okay. So love to everybody. Get out there and vote. I second that emotion, and I'll see you down the road.